It has changed so much. My circle is completely different now. Now, I have to be honest with you. Can I even call it circle? I don't know. I've lost so many friends because life changes as you grow
Mm.
older. People
Mm-hmm.
get married, people have children,
Mm-hmm.
people travel. So it's very different now.
Hello, and welcome to AudioLife, the podcast where we tell your story in your voice. I'm your host today, Carrie Purcell, and today I have a special co-host joining me, Grace Chen. Hi, Grace.
Hi. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad you're here with us too, Grace. So Grace and I know each other through the Quantic School of Business and Technology, where I did my executive MBA and actually developed the business plan for AudioLife. She's been one of our supporters and a community guru at Quantic, and she's also done her own AudioLife interview to share with her family. And while they're all truly memorable, Grace's is one I will never forget. It's always a pleasure to connect with Grace. So Grace, thanks for joining us today.
I'm so excited. This is going to be a great conversation, I can tell already.
It is. So you've had a chance to just briefly meet our guest who I'm going to introduce next. And I'm really excited to introduce someone who I consider to be just this strong, incredible woman. She's founded a company called Faith It, which she'll tell us more about. She's one of those strong single mothers who's driven by a mission to help others. And I can't wait to learn more about her journey so far. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sera Koukpaki. Sera, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Carrie. Hi, Grace. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So, Sera, Grace, the conversation we're going to have today is going to be one to explore the various factors that helped to form and inform the person that Sera is today. So she's going to talk a little bit about her family life, her business, how she came to be driven to do the work that she does today. But as always, I like to start the conversation at the very beginning by asking Sera, where were you born? And is there a story behind your name?
Thank you, Carrie. My name is Sera Koukpaki. I do have a middle name, and that is Oluwabukumi, and that is in Yoruba. And Yoruba is spoken in Benin Republic, West Africa, and also in Nigeria. Sarah is spelled in my mother's native language. I don't think it's recognized as a language here. Some people might call it a dialect, but essentially it's Sarah in the Bible, if you know the story of Sarah. Um, so that's the meaning behind it. And another middle name that I have is Petrus, and that is in Latin. My uncle, his name is Armand, and he is the elder brother to my mom, who's now late. Um, yeah, Petrus in Latin is like Peter, Pierret. And again, from the Bible, where you build a church on that. I didn't really get to learn the story of how I was born, etc., from my mom because she had a really short life. But I was born in Benin, Benin Republic. It's a peaceful, tiny country in the west of Africa. It shares a border with Nigeria, Togo, Mali, Burkina Faso. So I do speak French, and that's roughly where I'm born, and that's to paint the picture, really.
That's the very beginning. Okay, thank you for that. You have a beautiful name. I love your middle name. I just, that was very, very lovely. I'll hand it over to Grace to learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Wow, you have so much packed into your name already. So I learned so much just in a very short couple of minutes. Let's think about some words that you might describe yourself with. If you could think of 3 words that capture who you are, Sera, other than your name, of course, what would they be?
Wow, that's
Only
3
3.
words.
Only 3.
Okay. It has changed because
Mm.
it has changed a lot over the years, I have to say, because I moved a lot. growing up, and telling my story, sometimes I don't even believe it myself, because it's kind of, wow, I can't believe that happened to me.
Mm,
Or rather, now changing the language that happened for me.
mm,
From My mom was a teen mom, but she was the kindest mom I've ever known. And I'm not saying that because she's no longer here. She was really soft. She was a seamstress in West Africa. She loved styling people and styling me. I just remember growing up and saying, "Oh, mom, I saw this design and I'd like to wear it." She would stay up the night and, tailor a dress for me. And I felt really spoiled. I see an earring somewhere and, "Mom, I would like this." The next day I would have it. My dad, on the other hand, was uber strict, very education oriented. He was, well, at a time when I was born, he was very poor. He was just a student. But then as time went on, he became a teacher, then a lecturer and professor, etc. So I believe first word would be resilience, because
mm,
not having both parents married together and being raised under one roof opened me up to certain challenges, not just poverty to start with, but certain forms of abuse, and me having one eye and having to wear this thing that I have to do just to look good on the outside. And unfortunately, and having not really healed before entering a relationship myself, I find myself in this spot where I am a single mom, and it really is a minefield. But I do not let that be my deterrent, because I'm a trained accountant, and I've went on to work for big corporations as an accountant, finance analyst, and then realizing the gap in knowledge that I had, and then embarking on a master's in finance and accounting while child rearing, going through the course system for childcare arrangement, all of those things, only to start a business now, which is also a new thing. So I think my childhood, in a way, because it didn't make sense to me at first, but I'm realizing, because I felt really unfortunate, because my siblings would have a completely different story. They would
mm.
have, perhaps, mom is talent learning development manager, and dad is a professor. On my birth certificate, you would have dad's profession student, mom profession student. So resilience, number one. Number two would be forever evolving. And I think that's what it should be. Like, because I sit sometimes and I'm like, what am I today? Like, who am I today? Because me going to view different sites and stuff like that, and I'm like, wait a second, I'm an accountant. Are we changing identity here? I was never raised to become a business owner, a startup person. I was raised to be an employee. So I think resilient, bold, adventurous, probably three words. Yeah. Yeah, that's
I love it. I'd want you on my team. Whatever it is I have to do in life, you're someone that we would want on our side. Sera, they're just even captured in the three words: the resilience, bold, adventurous, forever evolving. I think my favorite one is forever evolving, which is pretty much what you
Mhm.
said right in the beginning, which is it does change. You've changed, and
Mhm.
but you are also still who you are. So that's such a lovely capture right away of who you are personally and professionally.
Those were wonderful answers, and it gave us such a sense of these different important aspects of your life already, just a hint of them, but really where it started, and so much of who you are. As Grace was saying, it's we sometimes those early moments are so important in informing who we are and how we respond to it. So I love the resilience and the awareness that it's just forever evolving as well. So I'm going to dig in a little bit more about childhood. What was it like growing up?
Oh, do you know what was it like growing up? I remember moving a lot from one household to the other. There was a
Mm-hmm.
time where I had to live with my grandma, who was a nurse. And here's the thing. I I don't know whether this is the right place to say this, but I feel like my entire lineage has been plagued with this single motherhood thing.
Mm,
And I really, really didn't want this to be the portion of my child. I wanted to do better. But my grandmom was married twice, divorced twice. And she was, she remained single mom. That's my paternal grandma. She was a nurse, very hardworking. So she would work at a hospital and she would also sell on the side. She would
mm,
sell to the hospital, people, the patients, things they needed that the hospital weren't providing. So that entrepreneurial side at first, because I would spend time in boarding school. I was also raised by nuns because I had to be in boarding school for some time. And, I was around rich kids that would come with
mm,
both mom, dad, big cars. Uh, and I would go home only to wake up at 4 a.m. and, accompany my grandma to do her morning, business before she embarked on her being a nurse journey. And I would return back to my boarding school and I would be ashamed to share those stories. And
mm,
I didn't go on holidays. I was just working. And it really only started to make sense when I was about to do my master's in 2019. And I was really strapped for cash to fund my studies. And the university directed me to fund and grant and funding scholarship website, but then you
mm-hmm,
had to share your stories. And one of those funds was that you would only be funded if you come from an entrepreneurial background.
mm,
If you have someone in your family, it could be your grandparent, and if you can share that story, you would be able to get the fund. And using the story of my grandma being a nurse and a single mom and entrepreneurial, that got me 5,000 toward my master's. Then everything started to make sense. Everything that I thought, like the surviving domestic abuse and losing my eye to it, all of those things started to make sense. I was like, okay, maybe this is that. But for years, I cried about all of these things. So there's that. And then I lost my mom before, by the age of 17. So many things happened. Moving a lot. Staying with the nuns in a boarding school with 300 other girls, rich girls. Um, it was all girl boarding school. Dealing with my dad traveling, not being there. Yeah, it's really a blur, but yeah. Did that answer your
okay.
question?
No, that was a wonderful answer, and you gave us things we're probably going to come back and revisit. You said it's a blur to you. Well, we're gonna break it down and go through some of those pieces further. But I do want to ask about just kind of a different perspective on growing up. What were some of your fondest memories?
Oh, fondest memory. That's interesting. I just remember one time I had my mom's mom, my grandma. She was just having not a siesta, not a nap, but we had a big veranda outside. You could see the cars passing by, everything. She was just laying, and I think she had her Bible or hymn book that she was reading. And I ran out from the main compartment of the house to the veranda where she was laying down. And I started to climb this guava tree that was out there. I'd seen the boys do that over and over, but I was never allowed. It was like, Petrus, don't do it. And I was like, why would boys do it? And I shouldn't.
Mm, good
And then,
question.
yeah, and then my granddad, um, yeah, I was very cherished by my granddad. He was a Sorbonne educated granddad. He walked out and came up and said, "Okay, you get down," with his very authoritative voice, and I had to get
Yeah.
down. And I was put on punishment. He asked me to kneel down and stay there for an hour for misbehaving. That was funny. Then my mom, we really didn't have a law, but I feel like there were moments where we had people around, not what I'm currently experiencing. I had my grandma, my mom coming from, how do you say it, her workshop, that would be atelier in French. And then you would have her interns coming in. It was busy. And there was also a time I remember when my grandparents, they had a very successful, we'll call it buvette, like people come and drink and like a bar stuff, and there were people coming in and out. It was very vibrant. But then I think there was also a period where that no longer existed, and it was really hard for us financially. We didn't even have electricity and in the home. But then in the midst of that, I remember my mom using her sewing machine with a lantern to make dresses, to make
Ah.
money. And I vividly remember that on Saturdays, there was a show that would come on the radio, and it's just a music show. And then in that chaos, she would come up. There would be my cousins there. One is called Audie, and she would just start dancing, and we'll just go and a Congo line round. And yeah, but I had to search really hard to find this, because for a long time people would ask me, "What is,
Mhm.
was it beautiful?" And I would always say no. I would say because of my selective memory,
Mhm.
I would focus on the bad things that happened, but those tiny moments did help a lot, and they're huge
Yeah.
moments now.
Yeah, they are, and you just colored a beautiful picture for us. And I understand what you're saying about being colored by the different circumstances at different points in your life. From what I know of you already today, you have a bright spirit, and I know you have a broad perspective. And sometimes just thinking, well, what were the fond points? What were the funny points? They bring back what was overshadowed at the time, and what is so big and meaningful now. So thank you for sharing that.
You're a fantastic storyteller, I have to say, Sarah. I can really picture everything that you're
Hmm.
sharing, and so let's go back to school days for a moment, and even just several minutes ago when you were talking about school life and the stark contrasts. It's almost as it when I hear you speak, you've had multiple lives all simultaneously happening at the same time. But let's talk about education for you at that time. Maybe we'll just revisit actually your boarding school days. What was that education experience like for you?
Thank you, Grace. Education. So my granddad, my paternal granddad, is a retired head teacher, super strict. My dad is now a professor, but he always didn't always start there. He was a teacher, primary teacher, and then worked his way up. He, Phew, okay. I think we'll need to interview him separately. But to paint the picture, it's a long line of educators. Yes, there was poverty, but I believe that education can put you in places that you could never get to without.
Hmm.
I wouldn't have met Carrie or yourself, Grace, if I hadn't dared to believe that without the fund, that I could get into Quantic and pursue my MBA. I just have that first to learn more, to know more. What is it that I'm doing today that I could do better in the future? So that has been instilled in me from a very young age. Um, my Yes, my mom got pregnant as a teen, so the odds were stacked against me. She had to stop because African country, you're doomed. when you make that huge mistake. So she had to learn a trade, and I feel like I'm living for her as well as for
Mm,
me, because I didn't get a certain closure until I started doing this work with Feifei.
mm,
My accounting career never answered all the things that happened for me. I used to say to me, happened for me growing up. So education is huge. And going back to the boarding school aspect, I think it was a training ground,
Mm.
because we have to, it was very regimented. Is that even a word?
yep.
Very rigid. With the nuns, we have to get up at 6 a.m. We have to pray. But before we get to the prayer line, we need to make sure our, bed was properly made. If you didn't, you could get picked up on from, in the class, and, given hours of detention, etc. So prayer 6 a.m. and then rush to get your bucket of water
Mm.
and then go to the bathroom. And after that, certain people's where, we would take turn and clean. So all that is part of the education. I don't believe it's simply about reading books, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Although I did a lot of reading books, I just remember there was a time at home when I got a lot of, can I just say ass whooping?
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a lot of that from my dad, because I think I have a stubborn element to me. Because perhaps I wanted to play, I don't remember. But I was told you had to do your homework. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
specific line I laugh about now with my dad. It's La carafe fele. It was from a book that was told to read, and I didn't want to read it. And my dad was hitting me, and I was stubborn. I was like, keep hitting me, I will not read it. Like, I don't want to read it. And he kept hitting me. And eventually I gave up and read like a half a fele. I just didn't want to be there. Looking back, it's funny now, but I don't think it was. My mom cried because that was abuse. You need to call it out. And that's why I don't touch my child. I do not condone hitting a child. And I'm actually called being too lenient with my child. So there is that aspect of reading, constantly doing homework.
Mm.
I have to say, maybe I didn't play a lot. So that's probably why when you ask,
Mm-hmm.
what was childhood like? I think I'm going to live my childhood. I feel like I'm living my life backward. I'm going to live my childhood. I think I'm starting to live it now that I'm in my
Mm.
purpose,
Mm.
because it's starting to make sense. I can be myself more. I can stop caring about other things. I can embrace ugly part of myself that I used to be ashamed of, that I thought were unfair. I can
Mm-hmm.
shed a different light on it. So
Mm.
educated by being raised by my grandma, occasionally by my aunties, sometimes it's different, by my mom who spoiled me rotten. If I'm a decent person who is not maybe psychotic, it's because of my mom. She kept me really grounded. So I struggle when she passed, really, because my mom was the softest, kindest. If my
Mm.
mom, picture my dad being this authoritarian person, really strict. If I hadn't had my mom, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now with the women that I work with, because you need that empathy. You need to really cover, because we are all about work, etc. But the other aspects of our life where even when you grow up and become an adult, you still need a hug, you still need someone to understand and
Mm.
support you. So I feel like it's been not just the books, although the huge emphasis was on the books. I didn't have much extracurricular activities, but I feel like it was made up for with moving home, being looked after by different people, and that entrepreneurial side from my grandma. Have I answered your question?
And now for a word from our sponsors. Ready to share your stories and life philosophy? Or capture those of a parent or grandparent? Or maybe a corporate package is right for you to build connection across your workforce and add value to your clients. Visit audiolife.io today to learn more. Our listeners will get 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. AudioLife, where memories find their voice.
Yes. These questions are just starting points, like a little door, and then we want to see what's behind that door, and that's perfectly what you just shared. When I listen to your stories just now, I can hear and almost see in my mind the different experiences, because yes, we might be in school learning and forced to do a lot of things we don't want to do, but meanwhile you are getting a lot of education in just life in general. And what's beautiful about growing up and getting or experiencing more life, we see the alignment and what all of that actually meant looking back. um, I do have I have to, I'm going to take a little like a side trip for a moment. You've mentioned one phrase more than once, that life happened for you, or certain things happened for you. Could you just take a moment before we um, move on to the next topic and just unpack that a little bit? Why do you say something happened for you?
Thank you, Grace. Up until recently, which is last 18 months, finally got myself in a space where I needed to understand myself and realize why I am the way I am, why I'm sensitive, why I'm told I'm too sensitive, why I'm told I complain a lot, why I can't get that emotional connection that I desire. I'm 35. I shouldn't be. I should get a husband. I shouldn't really be requiring that from my dad. But up until recently, I was still seeking it. And I love my dad. He could have left me when my mom passed away, could have left me back home, etc. He brought me over, but it hasn't been easy, adapting, different culture, learning language, etc. So it's been really, really tough, having a very logical dad and a very emotional Sarah, who has been vulnerable most of her life. And for a long time, I felt stuck in this mindset where I couldn't understand why I've always longed to have a nuclear family where mom and dad lived, because I never had that model for me. And I thought that I could have it. I thought I could circumvent what God had for me by not getting married and just simply cohabiting. And I think that's a big mistake when you look around at things that are happening to other people, especially, in your family, within your vicinity, and you say, oh, it never worked for so and so in my family, people got divorced, etc. And you internalize that, and then you end up replicating the same mistake. That requires you to go and seek help. And I was very unfulfilled in my accounting career. But now that I'm starting to combine it with Faye helping other women listen to their stories, then everything's starting to come together. I'm like, okay, fine. I survived that domestic abuse, and that was from my uncle. He beat me so much that, I had, and, lost an eye, etc. So it happened for me, but it was really hard growing up with that, because when you're growing up, and especially as a girl, you there is a certain emphasis on the way you look, you're pretty and all of this thing. Now I realize, oh, how cool is this? I can take my eye off and I can put it back in every morning, and I can say, this is my badge. Oh my God, I can't even believe this. You know, um, I think reframing your mind helps you and also helps others. But when you're stuck, you can't really make progress. So through therapy, the past 18 months, I've come to realize that I needed to change my language, because
Hmm.
if I hadn't had those experiences, I wouldn't probably, I don't know, we wouldn't know. But if I was stuck still, I wouldn't be speaking to you, Carrie. I wouldn't be speaking to you, Grace. And I believe I'm a Christian. I have my faith. I know certain Christian wouldn't really, you know, accept that because I'm a single mom. That's something that I had to contend with as well. But everything really does happen for you. I've given you the example where
Hmm.
someone gave me 5,000 towards my studies simply because I thought I was being unfairly treated by my grandmother, waking me up early to go and do her, things like that. So things do happen. If you look deep enough, far back enough in your stories, you hindsight actually realize, actually, you know what? People
Hmm.
weren't punishing me. They did me a
Mhm.
favor. And that
Mm.
language has helped me move on, and I'm still healing. I have some days where I'll be honest with you. I have some days where I wish I didn't have to like do this.
Mhm.
And one moment of that was when my dad is now married. He lives in Dubai with his wife, and I have a brother who is just under two. That's a happy ending. Raised by a single mom, but he's from Benin to there, happily married. Great. It gives me hope that I too can achieve things. But yeah, when I first met my dad's wife, um, he was still teaching at the University of York, and I didn't want my stepmom to know that I wear a glass, a prosthetic eye. And I was having an argument with my dad. My dad rushed out, got to his car, and was about to drive off. And I said, well, I don't want to follow him. I'm right, and he thinks he's right. and she was there playing the peacemaker, and she was like, I
Hmm.
said, I don't have my eye. She went, and she was like, what do you mean? And she brought me my eye, and that was the first time she saw it. And I felt deep shame, and that's why today I thought, you know
Mm.
what? If I'm going to be honest on this podcast, I've got to come as me. I've got to come with, things that happen for me to give hope to other people that might,
Yes.
be in the I'm feeling stuck phase. So I hope I've answered your question.
Oh my goodness. You that was I'm so glad that I asked that question. That so much there. We could have multiple podcasts. I can tell already. There could be a series just to
Yeah.
talk about such wisdom. But who you are, Sarah, is the glue that makes all of this work. Your resilience, your willingness to change and reframe and adjust your language, but maybe also your bold and fiery spirit at different times in your life is also what has propelled you. And I'm going to remember that phrase actually after hearing what you just shared.
Yeah. Thank you for everything you've shared so far, Sarah. Oh, I'm trying to decide where to go next.
I know. Choose your own adventure with Sarah.
we'll, we'll come back to academic pursuits because you have had a journey there where you've continued formal education. I really appreciated earlier as well how you took the education question and looked at every aspect of what you are aware was education, between routines, between lived experiences. And, it certainly isn't, not everybody has the fortune of formal education. And it's not what we're talking about today. We are talking about those things, those aspects that educated you, the people, the routines, the experiences. So I love that. We'll come back to formal education at some point. But I think I'll turn it to relationships at this point. And, you've talked about some really, really special relationships so far, your mother, your grandparents. Maybe I'll ask you, I won't try to lead you. I'll just kind of open it up to other, maybe one or a few other significant people that have had an impact on your life.
My dad being a big one,
Yeah.
being the firstborn to, I just feel like I I it's almost like condemning my dad. I've done it for a long time. So if you were friends with me 17 years ago, 20 years ago, you would have gotten a different story from what I'm going to be telling you today about my
Mm-hmm.
dad. Um,
It's okay.
um, Obviously, being the first daughter, you go through a lot with your parent, especially when they haven't really achieved things that they set out to achieve. And one picture that I remember, I must have been maybe 4 or 5. I was wearing this African attire, beautiful. And I just remember a big, long, stretchy road, and next to it, there was a farm there. And I just remember my dad taking me to the farm. And I remember um, he was planting beans. That's another, I hate eating beans because I told you my grandma, paternal grandma, she was a single mom. She came from a really wealthy family, but she didn't marry well, and all of that. That's another layer to everything. But I just remember my dad taking me to the farm and wanting me to help, you know, plant and also helping with the harvesting, etc. And I didn't understand. It's only recently that I'm starting to realize what he was doing. It was to go to wealthy people locally and say, do you have a land that we could use to cultivate grains and stuff that my family could use? He was from a family of 4, and my grandma was a law for everyone alone. So I couldn't understand, but I think that has had an impact on me. I hated it because the sun was scorching. My friends were probably, watching TV at the time and doing certain things. And I feel like I blocked all of those memories out for a long time and was really angry at my dad for some reason. And he's the only parent left, so of course we're gonna punch the bag. And very strict, so he pushed me to better myself, to better my education. He was very strict. I wouldn't describe him as the lovey-dovey. If my dad had the means, he will probably, he's the one to teach you to fish rather than providing you with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge impact. The next one is my mom, and I think that's why I struggled a lot. I used to go to mom for comfort, as you would, most people would. Yeah, mom was really sweet. She would cry. She couldn't even argue her case or anything for her. She always lost. She had the best intentions, but she would just cry. And so that's my mom. So I kind of always had my way with my mom. So when she left, I really, really, she went to heaven. I really struggled. My granddad, he was strict, but nothing like my dad. He studied in France in Sorbonne and came back to Benin. And I had my aunties and uncle. He had a huge impact. I was the first maternal grandchild, and he was really fond of me. And I felt really special, even before I lost my eye around the age of 6. I just remember I was the favorite. I just was the favorite. And then he passed away and things changed. He would tell me how beautiful I was, etc. So I actually, even after I lost my eye, I never really had that much issue about not feeling pretty. until my relationship with my son's child, you know, broke down, and then I started to make excuses. Oh, was I not good enough? Was I not
Mm.
pretty enough? All of those things. But those are false narrative, really, because yeah. So those relationship and friendship. Are we talking about friendship as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh goodness me. It just keeps changing. It has changed so much. My circle is completely different now. Now, I have to be honest with you. Can I even call it a circle? I don't know. I've lost so many friends because life changes as you grow
Mm.
older. People
Hmm.
get married, people have children,
Hmm.
people travel. So it's very different now. And, but I remember being a people person. I remember wanting to be around my friends. And also, I remember being friends with, well, she's now married with two kids, very busy. Um, yeah, maybe that was, I don't know, that was Misery Love Company kind of stuff. But she did have a huge impact on me because she had lost both her parents at a young age.
Hmm.
And being around her, I felt understood. And I think that's something that I crave for. My mom was really good at understanding people.
Yeah.
And once she went to heaven, I lost that. So I found that in my friend, Kolo, her name is, she's still there. So, yeah, she's had a huge impact on me. Recently, other people, I don't know whether I can call them friends, almost like mentors at this point, because I'm in a different space, learning a lot, embracing my inner child. Because when you become an adult and you've done so many other things before, it's so easy to say, oh, who are you to tell me to do this? So I'm having to go back into what it feels like to be a child and learn. So I would say right now I have more mentors
Hmm.
and coaches than friends like you, Carrie. I learned from you.
Well, I'm honored to be mentioned, and I'm so happy that we have met each other, that we have a relationship with a great bit of distance, and we haven't met in person yet.
Yes.
So tell us. So you're in Scotland today. You mentioned that I think it was when you were 17 that your father moved you. So tell us about that. Where did you move? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Right. Okay. So my mom passed when I was 15 years. I think it's 14 or 15.
Okay.
And then I lived with my paternal granddad, who's a head teacher, now retired head teacher, and then moved to Edinburgh. I think just before I turned 17, I believe. But trauma does do a trick to your brain. I've learned that in therapy recently. Um, I think for a long time I didn't live in my body, I have to say, because the pain was really great and I couldn't even make sense of my surrounding. Now, if you combine that with a new culture, I mean, if you
Hmm.
combine that with the fact that I spent about 5 years in boarding school, so although I was in Benin, 5 years in boarding school
Hmm.
with nuns and other people, there is a disconnect. Picture someone who went to a boarding school in Canada or lived in Canada, complete different reality from someone who would, you know.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect, and then coming to the UK and Scotland, cold,
Yeah.
with a trauma or multiple traumas and not being able to speak the language and having
Mm.
to go to school to learn the language, make new friends,
Mm.
and and realizing that it's not just about being human anymore. It's about, okay, we're teaching you that we're not, you have to tick boxes, the tick box exercise, if you will. If you're not used to it, it can be a shock to the system. Well, I was young, so I took it, as you will. You just you learn quicker, you adapt faster. So at the time, my dad wasn't married. So I just remember being London at the Edinburgh airport, and my stepmom at the time, although they were going through a divorce, my stepmom is from Doncaster. She's English, white English from Doncaster. Now lives, she's Scotch practically because she studied at Edinburgh University and taught there. So there she is, my stepmom, my brother who's mixed, and then my dad there, and then I get up and there it was just different because my dad had lived here for like a long time, and the environment changes you. Like there was no, it was very formal, there was no embrace like my mom would embrace, oh my daughter, stuff like that. It was a shock to the system in my own family. So that tells you the rest of the story pretty much, because it wasn't what I was expecting. I had my very black African dad, but who wasn't so very black African anymore. Like, oh daughter, here you are, welcome. Carpet rolled out, none of that. Very and I think that's what the environment does to you. That's what it is. And my stepmom, very British, and my brother, who now fights because people tell him he's not black, some other tell him he's not white, so he's fighting that. So that's the picture. And the shock to the system, adjusting to the weather, at school, I started public schooling before uni here. It was very interesting. And I just remember a particular moment where they gave me my Young Scot card. But then they told me, oh, you're not Scottish, blah, blah, blah. I was desperate to want to fit in. As you do at that age, you want to fit in, you want to belong, that sense of belonging. And I was just crying. And I said, why would I have a Young Scot card, Dad, and not be Scottish? I'm human being. But mind you, because I've gone through so much, although I was, 17, my brain was probably, 12 or 9 or something. I was stuck. And my dad was like, Sarah, think. Okay, think. Think. So huge emphasis on the logical side of things. That was the beginning. And then there were a few hiccups with that, obviously, because it's just different having to adjust. He was going through a divorce, and that was a big shock for me, because some people travel to achieve something. I moved over in my head. I moved expecting to join a family that I have longed for a long, long time, only to be met with Dad living in his own beautiful house and my stepmom living in her own beautiful house with my brother traveling in between. You can already picture, the stress and everything. So for me now, it makes sense that I'm trying to build a community with Fefe, because, I long for it. I feel there's a need for it. Having done the whole journey of single motherhood, halfway through it alone, it's impossible to do that alone without support and without the resources. Even with the best of the jobs, you still need the support system. I don't know whether I've gone off tangent or whether I've answered your question.
You've absolutely answered the question, and you've actually brought us right to the next important relationship that I want to make sure we talk about, which is your son. Stay tuned to hear part 2 of my conversation with Sera Koukpaki, to be continued next week.
If you like what you heard today, consider recording your own AudioLife private podcast or giving one to a loved one for a unique and memorable gift. Today, AudioLife listeners will receive 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. Also, remember to rate our show and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode.